Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Sunday, December 18th, and we are talking today about one of the four attributes that we attribute to Jesus. It's called the four Advent attributes. Advent means before the coming of Jesus. And so the one we're focusing on today is love. And our topic is love's healing vibration. So let's begin with an opening prayer.
Please.
So would you want to participate with me with this? Okay, so let's go within, just still our minds, feel our hearts, feel the love that is in our hearts, our love of life, our love of God, our love of our human beings, our loved ones, and loves for ourselves. For we know that this creates a vibration of wholeness, wellness, and creates an atmosphere of love and acceptance for everyone we come in contact with. We know that the divine lives in us, and we are all aspects, tiny, tiny sparks of the divine that is just as powerful as the big spark. We may heal ourselves, heal others, by simply knowing that and knowing that love always heals. We see ourselves and others as perfect, whole, and complete. And we see this season of love and joy as one to celebrate. We give great thanks, we release, and together we say, and so it is. And so I was telling Bob as we were discussing this, I was thinking of all the things that Jesus is purported to have done in the stories and in the Bible. And we were thinking, well, which ones were teaching love? Because, it's not like, from what we know, that he went around hugging everybody and smiling big and things like that. His love was not in that kind of outward demonstration, as far as we know, but it was his actions. It was his actions that were helpful to others that we attribute to the love of Jesus. And I started trying to think of some of the stories. And the first one, and probably the main one, and was that he's purported to have said, there are only two laws that you need to be concerned about. Because, by the way, the 10 Commandments were not 10. If you find the section of the Bible where that is, and I think it's Genesis, but there are like 113 commandments. Mm-hmm. The Jews used to say they had so many commandments that a person could not keep all of them in one day. But he said there are only two laws that you need to be concerned with. The first one is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul. And the second was equal to it, which is love your brother as yourself. And so that love your brother is one that has been difficult for human beings, because we came up in a tribal system and everything was us against them. And we were pretty clear at identifying the other, but had kind of a hard time of loving the other and loving everyone. But so other than that saying, generally, he showed it by his actions. There was the one where a woman was being stoned, which was the acceptable punishment for adultery. And adultery, by the way, was defined as when a married woman was unfaithful. Men didn't have that same rule. They could have multiple wives, and we call them mistresses. What did they call them? Consorts or something like that. Whatever name they called it. So it was just women, Jewish women, who could be stoned for adultery. And they were busy stoning her when Jesus came upon them and said, halt. Who among you
is without sin?
Cast the first stone. Yeah. And they stopped because that was a pretty bold thing to say. So that was a kind and loving thing to do. he could have easily just said, well, these are our laws and our customs, and walked on. Of course, he healed many. He's purported to have healed many, and that's a loving thing to do. He cared about people's well-being. He was non-combative. He told them to give unto Caesar's, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's, when they wanted to kind of fight this idea of having to pay taxes to Caesar. Anyway, he did lots of things like that that we consider loving. He was good to women. He had and appreciated the company of Mary Magdalene. He treated women as equals, and that was a very rare thing in those days, as far as we know. And so when we consider love and giving more love in the world, we think of him and his actions. So that's one of the attributes. I wanted to share one of the I said attributes of the Advent season. Rumi has a great quote that I love. It says, "Your acts of kindness are iridescent wings of divine love, which linger and continue to uplift others long after your sharing." Iridescent wings of divine love.
Beautiful.
So that moves us into this vibration of love and what it is and how it affects people. Do you want to start with that, Father?
Sure. Wash your glasses. And Judith just went away, and now she's back. Well, we were thinking a lot about love, not the kind of romantic love, but the kind of love that is possible.
Brotherly love.
Brotherly love, right? And thinking about that, it occurred to me that that kind of love starts from inside rather than from the outside. That it's an internal willingness to say yes to yourself and to the kindness that you need to express toward you. And what I've seen is that so many of us, so much of the time, are not happy with ourselves. We're not kind to ourselves. We're not able to be kind or forgiving or even nice to ourselves in many cases. And that's often unconscious. And so since it's unconscious, we don't realize that it's out ahead of us and it's an energetic field that surrounds us. And so what I'm talking about now is the energetic field that we create out of the consciousness that we have of love. And so the more things we can do that affirm kindness and love and appreciation of self and others, or of the world we live in, the more we're going to have a world that not only works for us, but a world in which love is a reasonable part of it. Many people believe that love is unreasonable. And I say unreasonable, they haven't been able to reason why. They haven't been able to reason themselves out of their fears and upsets and difficulties. They haven't been able to come up with logical reasons to be kind, so they're not. And so we often then walk around the world waiting for the opportunity to shift from not nice to nice, from not kind to kind. And we don't realize we're doing that. And a lot of that is a survival strategy. That is, we're not sure we're safe. If we're not safe, we're not going to expose ourselves or expose our heart or our emotions. The problem with that, of course, is that we then can wait our entire lives for the opportunity to express something that we needed to develop, and not only need to develop, but that we prosper from developing and sharing. And it takes me to Leo Buscaglia. Many of you know about Leo Buscaglia. He was a professor at a university, and he had the occasion of teaching.
I think Berkeley.
Berkeley, okay. He was teaching at Berkeley, and there was a student, a shy student, who was very quiet, who didn't come to class after a while, and he didn't know what had happened to her. So he inquired and found out that she had killed herself. And that really struck home for him in a way that was really profound. And he decided at that point that any act of kindness that he was able to manage or to express was necessary, important, and valuable. And he then became, as we now know him, as the doctor of love. And the reason for that is that he would look for ways to celebrate love in the most awful and negative situations. One of the times he was on an airplane, which is never a fun trip, and all of the passengers were, grumpy as they often are, with not enough space and not enough of anything that they wanted. And he decided that he wanted to have a party. And so he created a party. He had the steward or the flight attendants bring out whatever they had. He said he would pay for it, whatever was necessary. And they partied for 2.5 hours, not with alcohol, but with joy. And maybe some alcohol, but that wasn't the primary substance of joy. He was a man who's believed in the substance of love. He was walking across
He
campus.
made it his purpose.
Yeah, he was walking across campus one time when he met a probably an attractive woman. And whether she was or wasn't, he was certainly attracted to attractive woman. And he introduced himself, and she said, "I don't know you, and I'm not talking to you." And so she walked away. And the next day he saw her again. He said, "Hi," and she said, "I don't know you." He said, "Yes, we met yesterday." So he was somewhere between a person who practiced kindness and love or a stalker. We're not sure. But he did this again and again and again. But what was most important is he didn't wait for the invitation to be kind. He didn't wait for the right space or the right time to be kind. He just brought kindness with him. And that's an energetic force that we have, that we don't know we have, that we carry, that surrounds us. You wonder why. And when we did seminars across country, we did a lot of workshops. And the joke used to be that no matter what I was booked in, I would end up in first class. And I would end up in first class because there was a kindness that I had and a joyfulness and a playfulness that I had with the people at the flight desk that people just generally don't have. And I would say, "Well, I'd like to be in first class." And they would say, "Well, there's no room." And I said, "I understand that." And we would laugh and we would have fun, and then they would move me forward. People can't wait to serve kindness. They can't wait to serve joy and love.
Because they get so much of the opposite at that
Exactly.
time.
And I remember, and it's a short story, but I was working in the emergency room covering mental health, and I was doing evaluations. And a young man came in who was suicidal. And normally I would see a person for 20 minutes, and that's usually all I had. It was a fairly quiet night. I saw him for 20 minutes, told him he needed to wait longer, went back and saw him for another hour, and I told him he needed to wait longer. And then I waited, and I saw him again.
Longer for what?
So I could talk with him and continue to
okay.
evaluate him. He was thinking, how long is this going to go on? Anyway, it went on for the better part of the night. I wouldn't let him go. And I didn't want to admit him to the hospital because I didn't think it was appropriate, but I continued to talk to him. What I also did was to continue to value and appreciate and acknowledge the soul and the heart of him that I could see and feel that he didn't know I could see or feel. I did that for the better part of the night, and finally I discharged him. And that was the end of the story. About a month later, I got a letter from him through the emergency room that his plan had been to outlast me and go home and kill himself. But by the time I had finished the evening, he felt so connected and so cared about that he made a decision that he wanted to do what I was doing. He wanted to become a social worker. 4 years later, I get an invitation to his graduation with a bachelor's degree. And 2 years later, I get an invitation to his master's degree. And he knew I was there. And when it was all done, came up and shook hands and said, "Because of you." And I told him, I said, "Yes, I understand that, and I appreciate that. And I'm here because of you in so many more ways than I might have been were it not for you." Mm-hmm. And so the kindness I gave, it came back. I mean, I spent a couple of hours with him, and that came back again and again and again. Imagine getting a letter from somebody who you thought was going to possibly not survive, who thrived, and it had to do with you. So it's the small things we do, the smallest of small things we do, that make a huge difference.
Dr. Carl Rogers was a psychologist, one of the early ones in the humanist movement. Yeah. And he had a technique that all he did was this. He gave his patients unconditional positive regard. And I love that phrase because sometimes we can't muster up a feeling of what we call love for a stranger or someone who might even be very annoying or even worse. Mm-hmm. But you can always muster up unconditional positive regard, meaning I'm not going to say or do anything to show or let you know that I disapprove of your actions or disapprove of you, that I don't like you. I'm not going to show that. I will only give you the benefit of the doubt and offer unconditional positive regard. And people thrive with that. Mm-hmm. They would just open up and talk to him, and he mostly just listened. He mostly just listened and allowed them to express themselves. And the more that they got his sense of approval of them, the more well they got, the more they could accept themselves. And so I offer that as a suggestion for when you might be in the company of someone who's annoying or irritating. Just consider unconditional
Mhm.
positive regard. You don't have to say or do anything negative.
And the faster you're able to do that, the faster you're able to turn it around, the more effective it is in helping you center yourself in love. I had the occasion recently where I work. I work in a crisis center where people are admitted to the hospital or to the hospital, I guess you could call it, treatment center, because they're in crisis and they're overtly psychotic. I mean, really, really, really psychotic. In fact, we have usually 2 or 3 gods at the same time that are in the hospital who believe they're God, which is tough. But I'm having
Who's the bigger guy?
yeah, really, we have God contests. So I'm doing a talk in front of 15 people, some of whom are asleep and some of whom are mildly interested. And all of a sudden, I feel water pouring over my head and down my back. And one of the clients, who I guess didn't feel attended to, decided to dump a glass of water on my head. And so I turned around and, of course, removed the glass of water from him. And then what happened is everybody was in shock, waiting for me to scream, yell, holler, or be upset. And I said, this is my first baptism since I worked here. And then I turned around and I started walking and I looked down and the floor was covered with water. And I said, and I get to walk on water. How good is that? And then I continued my talk. And when I finished the talk, well, one of the clients came up and said, the way you did that is the way I'd like to be able to do my entire life. I don't know how you did that, but that's what I'm going to work on from now on. And I said, well, what were my choices? He said, well, you could have smacked him. I would have. And I said, and that would have gotten me where? He said, I don't know. I didn't think about that. I said, I did. And so we have to think about our reactions and ask ourselves, what would be the kindest thing that I'd like to be remembered for, that I'd like to remember myself for, that I'd like to say that I did, as opposed to what is the automatic response. My automatic response had to be monitored, had to be regulated, because generally I don't have those baptismal experiences out of church. So, but again, it's how quickly can you grab a situation that has a negative energy to it and convert that into something where you can laugh at it, or you can feel good about it, or you can go back at the next day and say, that actually worked out pretty well. And so practicing kindness, practicing love, which means asserting that you're going to land like a cat on your feet, no matter how many times you fall. And that's really positive.
Can I talk about the
No,
vibration of
no,
love?
yeah.
I was telling him, because he comes home from work pretty exhausted, because people there are pretty angry, pretty explosive,
Well, they're
and
dangerous, actually.
dangerous, actually. One likes to jump through over a counter and destroy computers, so it can be dangerous. But I was saying, well, no wonder you feel that, because all of that is a vibration. We are a vibration. We are vibrating. And so when someone is coming with a vibration of anger and violence and fear and all that, it mingles with your vibrations and it changes yours, as does the vibration of love. They are different frequencies of vibration. And love calms, love creates calmness, and it changes others' vibrations when you are loving, when you can be loving, and that changes them. So that's also a way that we love others, is by being love,
Right.
being in the vibration of love, calmness, and that is contagious also. So it's just important to know that that's a very powerful thing that you have.
Right. And I can't imagine what it would be like to go through some of the days that I go through and come home to somebody who was not loving, not kind, not understanding, and not appreciative. So part of what also helps you to be kind and loving is, if you can, to surround yourself with as many supports as you can that are kind and loving, that are models for it.
Yes.
Years ago, we worked Judith and I actually worked together in a hospital. And this hospital, was the hospital administrator would constantly tell me, I was the director of a program, and he said, you're going to have to admit more patients. And I said, I only admit appropriate patients. And he said, you're going to have to admit patients that aren't appropriate if you want to stay open, or I'm going to take all your nurses and I'm going to shut you down. I'm walking back to the unit where I'm working, thinking of, I've got 18 staff people that are all going to be unemployed if I don't admit more patients. I was thinking about maybe breaking the rules, maybe admitting somebody that wasn't really appropriate, but that would keep us afloat for the greater cause. I was being willing to slide off of the moral high standard that I had for myself. The assessment officer that I had hired came up. She said, Bob, you're going to be so proud of me. I said, what do you mean? Well, there was a person who wanted to be admitted really badly. And I remembered you telling me only admit appropriate people. And I did that. And you're going to be so. And I said, I am proud of you. and I bit my tongue. And grabbed my heart and said, how blessed am I to be surrounded by people who I have trained to support me and the right way of being, even when I'm on a slippery slope myself. Anyway, the end of the story was we admitted 4 more people that were appropriate. The hospital administrator saw me the next day and said, "See, I think that talk was a good talk, wasn't it?" I said, "Excellent, excellent talk. So glad you shared." And you learn to talk to administrators that way. Yes, your ideas are all good. You're a wonderful person. And but at the same time, what we find is that if we can surround ourselves in the consciousness, which is why we have a center, to set the consciousness of love and kindness, we are more likely to stay infected with that. And the more we surround ourselves by pain and suffering and bad news, the more that becomes contagious and part of our consciousness.
Well, you told me a story this morning about the value of a kind word, and now I can't remember. You're disappearing. Now I can't remember. Do you remember who it was that you gave a kind word to and it made such a difference?
No.
We have these great conversations in the morning before we do this.
Well, there
talk.
was a person that I just met recently, and he and his fiance spent some time with us yesterday, and there was something about them that was just so incredibly kind. They were just, and so I told him today, I saw him and I said, I met you yesterday, and one of my professional roles is to do assessments, mental health assessments, and you get to be pretty good at gathering data about people and whether they are happy or not happy or whatever. And I said, all I could do when I walked away from you and your fiance was to say, there's such a kindness in them that is so wonderful. He said, you have no idea how important that is and how valuable that is to me. It doesn't take a lot, but you want to frame it in a context where you're able to have them see that you're not just saying something nice, which is why I prefaced it with, this is what I do for a living, and what I'm seeing as a professional is an extraordinarily kind person. Whoa, that means something to me. So we can be meaningfully loving and kind, but the residual for that, or the effect of that on me, was I watched his smile and I watched the depth of and richness of the kindness that I had seen explode in front of me. And I thought I had something to do with that. That's really cool.
And Bob didn't even know this, but my understanding is that he has been, he's a young man, right? 30
Yeah, struggling with depression.
But we didn't know that either.
No.
But he has been a CEO of a tech company, and he's taking a year off right now to sail around the Bahamas. But so you can imagine that a CEO of a tech company has many roles and jobs. Loving people is not usually one of them.
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, that seems to be his nature. So he may have needed a break from the CEO role. And it was nice that you could see it and say it,
If you see good, say something about it and watch it. It's like putting gasoline on a fire, only the fire is a heart fire. And you're lighting up the consciousness in a way that people love to have happen. And you get to be part of that. You get to feel the warmth from that heat.
We saw this morning on CBS Sunday Morning a true story of 2 young girls that were sent to the United States on their own at the ages of 14, 15, from Hungary when they were.
Ukraine.
No, it was Hungary, because it was back in 1999.
Yeah.
And so they were scared. They were on a plane going to America by themselves. And when they were sitting next to a very nice lady, and when she left, she handed her an envelope. And when the girl read the envelope, first of all, there was $100 bill in it. And she said, I hope your stay in the United States is safe and happy. And, it was very nice meeting you. She said that $100, because they joined other relatives who were already there in New York. She said that $100 fed the family for 3 months. And it changed her whole life as far as the purpose of her life. Now the purpose of her life is always helping others. And they recently did a search for her. They didn't know where she lived, but her name was on that letter. She was from a town in Minnesota, and they had a reunion, and it was just pure love. It was pure love circulating. So it was it's a beautiful story. Watch it if you can today.
Yeah, and you'll see she's from Ukraine. Anyway.
I don't think so.
It was a revolution, 2014 revolution in Ukraine.
1999.
It was think it was Buffalo in the order, but no.
Guess what?
What-
It's time for us. to wind
whatever.
up. It's time
Uh,
for us to wind up.
But the most important part of that story, aside from where it happened, is that the love keeps going.
Mm.
The love has a life of its own long after you share it. So thanks for sharing the Ukrainian story.
You're welcome. So,
Okay.
would you like to close with a prayer?
Yes, I'd like to. I'm going to do it in the Ukrainian dialect. No.
Okay.
Okay, so we've already been together, and now we're together even more wonderfully and more magically and more divinely, because we've decided that being together in consciousness and in love is valuable. We've shown a light today on love and the joy of love, and each of us now has that glowing within us in a way that is just richer and better than it might have been were we not to have had this conversation and the sharing in this time together. So today we say thank you for the opportunity to share, to love, and to care. We know that this is the way the universe works. We know the universe works in favor of us, and we say thank you. And together we say,
And so it is.
And we are going to now move to share a screen, and I can see this here now. Okay. And okay. Whoa. Not what I want. There we go. You want to start us off?
Oh, sure. So this is your opportunity to share the love, share the knowledge, so that we may continue giving our message every week and serving you during the week as we can. We are always available by phone, and well, Bob's not always available, but I generally am. And our phone number is on our website, as is this opportunity to give. There's a button at the top of our website that says ways to donate or ways to give. And you can just click on one of those buttons and share through PayPal or credit cards. And we like to do this affirmation, because as you give, you do receive. It is a circulation. So it's an investment in your own prosperity. So if you'd like to say with me, my investment today is made with a full realization that God is the source of my supply and returns it to me enriched and multiplied. And so it is.
Okay, so we're going to end the recording part, and we're going to move to a piece of music for those of you that are going to stay with us, which we'd love to have you do. And then we're going to join you afterwards. Let's make this small. And
I think you can do the red button, right?
no, stop sharing. That's what we want to do. Okay. And end recording.
Yeah. Square box.